Thank you very much. I am so excited about turning this microphone on because then I can share with you some thoughts about the road as church. The church as road, the road as church. Could go both ways. I normally teach Europe through the back door. I normally talk about how to travel independently in Europe on a budget, you know. And I found my niche. I'm so thankful for that. I've spent, ever since I was a kid, spending 4 months a year in Europe, living out of a 9 by 22 by 14 inch carry-on the airplane size suitcase, hanging out with people who find different truths to be self-evident and God-given, getting out of my comfort zone, and just teaching up a storm. And I never had a big plan, but back in the 80s, it was all about cheap tricks. And then in the 90s, I wrote a book called Europe 101, and I thought, well, you can read the book about how to pack light and catch the train and find a hotel. I want to inspire people to enjoy the history and the art and the culture and so on. And that was exciting from a teaching point of view. And then after 9/11, I realized the ultimate thing to be teaching in regards to travel is how to get out of your comfort zone and become more at ease with the other 96% of humanity. Travel as a political act. And really, I've had so much fun as a travel teacher, as a tour guide, and a TV host, and so on, trying my very best to inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. There's one guidebook that outsells the Rick Steves guidebook to Italy, and it's the guidebook to Disney World. La La Land. You got that option. You can go to La La Land, or you can go to reality. You can go to Cancun, or you can go to Guatemala. You can go to Mazatlan, or you can go to Managua. And personally, I'd rather go to Managua, you see. That's, to me, the exciting thing is to venture out of our comfort zones and then come home with what I think is the most beautiful souvenir, and that's a broader perspective. So that's travel as a political act. And, I give talks called Travel as a Political Act. You could see this talk with the secular focus on my website or on TV, on public television, and so on. It's all there. But what I really enjoy now as a Christian is the challenge to kind of think, well, what spiritually, what's woven into my travels also? Because travel as a political act can be travel as a spiritual act. And it's funny, it's so funny how ethnocentric we are in so many ways. And we're also ethnocentric about our religion. I mean, you go to Sri Lanka and Jesus is not white and he doesn't speak English, And that is such an exciting revelation for an ethnocentric, white, English-speaking American. So what I want to talk about today is not just travel, not just tourism, but also travel as a pilgrimage and that sort of thing. So I don't know how on earth I'm going to limit this to an hour, but I'm going to try to get it down to an hour. So it's a little bit, I'm just going to see how far I get, and then we're going to have dinner. And then I'm very excited about screening with you my new show, Hunger and Hope, Lessons Learned in Ethiopia and Guatemala. Just tomorrow, it debuts on public television all over the United States. Every station's going to run it in the next couple of months, but I thought you might like a sneak peek at it. So I'm going to talk for about an hour, maybe 75 minutes. Then we'll have, as Bill said, a short dinner break. And then after that, we will go to Ethiopia and Guatemala and view this show. And then after that, I'm really looking forward to a little bit of Q&A, okay? So, I'm a tour guide. For decades, I've been taking groups around, and different people go to Europe for different reasons. I'm very Eurocentric. That's our beat. My favorite country is India, but Europe is the wading pool for world exploration, the way I teach it. I'm just trying to get people to go to Europe and have a good time, and then the rest of the world will open up to them. And people have, for centuries, traveled as pilgrims, and today you can go to the same place. You can go there as a tourist, or you can be traveling with a little bit of that pilgrim stuff woven in. But one great thing about Europe is it connects you with the wonders of our creation. It's such a vivid way. And if you're a person of faith, you can see that in connection with God. I find I get closer to God when I'm traveling. Or you can just go, wow, that's great if you're not a person of faith. But it is exciting when you travel to just gain an appreciation of nature. And as a travel writer, my goal is to bring home the magic so people can be inspired to travel and then get the information there so they can travel smartly and smoothly. when you grow up in the United States, you're very likely to think cheese is orange and the shape of the bread. There, cheese sandwich. And you go through your whole life thinking that's what cheese is, orange and the shape of the bread. And then you go to Paris, and these cheese shops are like a festival of mold. The cheesemonger is evangelical about his cheese. And I go in there as the cultural bumpkin, and he goes, "Oh, monsieur, come here." And he takes me to the goat cheese section, picks up a moldy water goat cheese, takes a deep whiff. "Oh, smell this cheese. It smells like the feet of angels." Smells like the feet of baseball players to me, but whatever. You mean people pay a lot of money for this stuff? It's just exciting to think that some people get very excited about stinky, expensive cheese and other people don't. And as travelers, we get to sample out there and see what turns us on. And then we can go back to our square cheese that's orange, or we can become a little more sophisticated when it comes to cheese. Either way. But when you get out and travel, you realize the world has more dimensions. It's the same with people. The mark of a good trip is how many people do you meet, not how many famous things do you see, or how many cliches on stage do you see, or how many selfies do you take. It's how many people do you meet. That's what carbonates the experience. If I'm leading a tour, writing a guidebook, making a TV show, or just going on vacation with my family, the mark of the success of that trip is how do we connect with the locals. And you need to be an extrovert. You need to get out there and make it happen. And I'll tell you, it is so rewarding. I meet more interesting people in a month in Europe, I think, than I do for the rest of the year back home. It's just amazing, all the people you come into. And they're not people that we would normally think to be with, you know. We tend to gather together in people like us, people that look like us, people that worship like us, people that think like us. It's really helpful to get out and break bread with people who, again, we're raised finding different truths to be self-evident and God-given. You can have some dramatic encounters, or you can have some goofy encounters. I was in Italy recently, and this kid was staring at me. Finally, his dad said, "Excuse my son, he stares at tourists." I said, "Well, why is that?" He said, "Well, last week we were at McDonald's having our hamburger, and my son, noticing the fluffy white bun, said, 'Dad, why do Americans have such soft bread?' And the dad said, 'Son, it's because Americans have no teeth.'" And I don't think the dad meant anything by that. It's just what dads do when they're out with the kid, is they say nonsensical stuff to entertain themselves and confuse the child at the same time. But now the kid was wondering if I had teeth, and he looked at me and I showed him my teeth and overcame that one little silly misunderstanding between people. But there are so many silly misunderstandings between people. You encounter them all the time when you travel. And the more we get to know each other, the more we can overcome those. Some of them are just silly, but some of them can be dangerous. One thing I love about travel is when we go to a land where we're supposed to not like those people, we make people-to-people connections, and then it makes it tougher for their propaganda to demonize us, and we come home, it makes it tougher for our propaganda to demonize them. If everybody could meet everybody, there'd be a lot fewer bombs dropping, I think, and it would just be a beautiful thing. And that's another beautiful thing about travel. One of my favorite countries is Ireland. And in Ireland, I get this feeling that I'm understanding a foreign language. I've never had that actual feeling, but in Ireland, people have the gift of gab. They love to talk, and they've got this wonderful lilt. And on the west coast of Ireland, that's a Gaeltacht, a national park for the traditional culture. People speak Gaelic first, Old Irish first, and English second. So you walk up there, they're speaking Irish together. You don't even know it. As a tourist, they turn to you, speak English, and then you step away, and they go back into their Gaelic. And when my theory is that when they speak English, they're constructing it with a Gaelic template, and it's just so colorful and so charming. And I just find it a beautiful part of traveling in Ireland is to meet those people. And we have the advantage, if we're a monoglot, of actually understanding that language. This is a long time ago, but I was standing there talking to these guys, and I asked the guy on the left, "Were you born here?" He said, "No, it's about 5 miles down the road." I said, "Have you lived here all your life?" He said, "Not yet." I mean, it's just they've got this wonderful way of, wit. And it's part of the travel to meet these people. You gotta meet people. You just gotta make it up. Just last summer, I was hiking on the Italian Riviera, the Cinque Terre, way in the inland where there's no tourists at all. And I came to this church, and the father there tracked me down, and it shocked me. He said, "Are you Rick Steves? Rick Steves?" I said, "Yeah." "Why?" And he said, "You've written something in your book that we think is not very polite." And I had a joke in the book that you should look at the security camera up there and wave at it. Because it's there to look. There's nobody in the church normally, and tourists could damage some of the great art, And he said, "This is a sacred place. We'd rather you didn't do that." So, I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Forgive me, Father." And he invited me into his monastery. And I struck up a conversation with him, and all of a sudden I'm on the balcony drinking limoncello, and we actually got a little drunk together. And I mean, you can meet the coolest people if you make yourself available to that. And that was the highlight of my day, was meeting this father, and he was so excited to share with me his homemade limoncello, and we drank it with that view. But it's that people dimension that you just can't get enough of. We are interesting people. We have to remind ourselves that. When we go somewhere, make it available. One very good trick, I think, is to be a cultural chameleon. I'm like physically a culture chameleon. When I'm in a university town in Italy, I like a spritz. I don't ever feel like a spritz here. When I'm in Belgium, I mean, a lot of people say chocolate is to die for. I just don't buy that. Unless I'm in Belgium. Okay, then chocolate is to die for. And I'll go to the finest chocolateria, and I'll really get into it. Tea makes no sense to me here. I've never made a pot of tea in the Western Hemisphere. But in England, a spot of tea is just right. In the Czech Republic, a nice, refreshing Pilsner is beautiful. In Tuscany, a full-bodied glass of red wine. I've never gone home in Seattle, where I live, after a long day of work and felt like a nice cloudy glass of ouzo. A lot of times I buy a bottle of liquor and I bring it home and I go, why did I bring this home? It tasted so good over there, it's just not right here. But in the spot, when I'm in Greece, I don't let a day go by without a nice cloudy glass of ouzo. So in our travels, it makes sense to be adapting, embracing those different lifestyles. We can approach the art and the culture with the wonder of little kids, I think. You can step into a pantheon, and you can think 1,800 years ago, they were trying to figure out God, and they built this. It's an amazing place, a temple to all the gods. The Gothic cathedrals of Europe, many of them took 200 years to build. Imagine the dedication to building a place to worship, for the community to worship together. It's astounding to me that an architect or a foreman or a worker could get involved in something that they knew would not be finished in their lifetime. It took 6 or 8 lifetimes, yet they still it consumed that community. And for us to go there today and try to understand, what was it like? What was the wonder of the world? To have the mystery of creation, deep-seated need to understand and get close to God, and as a community to sort that out, and then to build an amazing cathedral, and to be able to step into those cathedrals. What was the difference between Gothic and Romanesque? It was a big deal. Romanesque churches were dark. They had thick walls because the walls had to support the ceilings. And then 800 years ago, they innovated the pointed arch, pushing the weight of the stone roof out instead of down. Buttresses could do the supporting with a skeleton of support, and the walls became window holders. And then you've got that glorious light from heaven shining through, illuminating all those Bible stories. To see that through a kind of a cynical, modern, 21st century eyes, or to see that with the wonderment of somebody in the 14th century, we need to see it in the proper context, I think. It's such a beautiful thing to be able to go back and experiencing these things in a contemporary sort of wonderment. Stepping in as a tour guide, for me, to take a group into St. Peter's Basilica is one of the most exciting things. You're out there in the hot, noisy city, and then you step through. I always go first, and then I look around and I watch the faces of all my group coming in, and it's just, wow, the greatest church in Christendom, St. Peter's Basilica. It's so important to see it on its terms. It really is if you're exploring the world and opening up to things. I know from my own personal experience here, for many, many years, I went to this St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican as an angry Protestant. Going there and just pissed off at all the money that was wasted on this golden stuff when there's real need out there in the community. What's with this? And then I learned, no, park your Lutheran sword at the door. Become a Roman Catholic, just if nothing else, just for your visit in there and see it on its terms. And it became a beautiful experience. I just love being able to do that. In a mosque, in a synagogue, in a church that's different than mine. Just be open to it, because we're traveling around the world to rub elbows with other people's, what's important and how other people think. Know what you're looking at. You know, if you go to the St. Peter's and you don't know that the bushy guy with the key is St. Peter, if you don't know the last thing he saw when he was martyred was that obelisk in the square in front, and then he was taken to a humble little cemetery on Vatican Hill, and that for 200 years, almost 300 years, people worshipped in secret after dark on Peter's tomb. And then Constantine became a Christian in 312 AD, and suddenly it's okay to be a Christian, and they built a big church there. And that was the root of the Vatican. And then, you know, you step inside and you see those big letters, 6 feet tall, that say, Tu es Petrus, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. It's so important to have a context for what you're going to see, if you're fortunate enough to be able to travel, to get the most out of it. People want a better price for things. You're not really going to get a better price for it, but if you know twice as much about it, it's worth twice the value, I think. So bone up on it in advance, and then when you go there, it's the best deal going, I'll tell you that. Too many people step into a place like St. Peter's with the wrong attitude and no understanding of the context. Michelangelo's Pieta, just to the right as you enter. And to have a priest explain the theology behind Michelangelo's Pietà, for me, was just a beautiful thing. I was so thankful for it. So as we travel, we need to be open to different interpretations. I love the thought that we were talking about people long before they were moving images, when people were awestruck by things that don't strike us that way anymore. And to find a painter, and then to understand, you know, the patron had an agenda, the painter had an agenda. This is by Fra Angelico. Fra Angelico was the most spiritual painter of the High Middle Ages, I think. For him, painting was a form of prayer. It was said he could not paint a crucifix without weeping. And to stand there in front of this Annunciation, there in the monastery, from where Savonarola ruled Florence as a theocracy, in the middle of the Renaissance, kicking out the Medici and turning it back into a medieval-style theocracy. Wow, what an amazing, heady time. And to know a little bit about that, and then to step into that monastery and think that every one of those cells had a wallpaper, a fresco by Savonarola. And that was what they would meditate on. Not by Savonarola, by Fra Angelico. The notion in Europe of community is really built into the architecture of the cities. I think it's something that contributes to a lot of the need in our community is there's no real piazza. You know, my favorite country in Europe is Italy, and I think part of that is because of the piazza. It goes all the way back to ancient Rome, the piazza. And Siena has, I think, one of the very best piazzas, Il Campo. And this is just the living room. Everybody goes, all the different generations. It's where they go in good times and bad times. It's where they go to relax. It's welcoming. It's got the beautiful starry skies above it and all the rusticated buildings from its past. It holds the community together. The piazza. In my own community over outside of Seattle, we're recognizing we don't really have a piazza in our town. And it's hard for people to come together. When people are, you know, they got their garage doors that close and then they're anonymous at home watching TV, it threatens the fabric of our communities in a way that in Italy you don't really have so much. Of course, Italy has these beautiful piazzas, and it's part of the whole passeggiata scene, the passeggiata. I just love the passeggiata. Everybody's out, showing off, gossiping, checking in on each other, caring for each other. It lends itself to a tight community. It lends itself to a tight community. After going to Italy, I go back to Seattle and I take a walk down the street and I'm the only man on the street. It's almost like mothers are grabbing their children and taking them behind the fence because there's a stranger on the street, you know. It's not that welcoming community. We strive to have a big freezer in the garage, so we only have to go shopping every other week and we get a good deal at the big box store. You know, in much of Europe, they actually aspire to have a little fridge under the sink, so they have to go to the market every morning and pay too much for their food to check in with their neighbors. It's family values. They celebrate their culture from generation to generation, which is something I really love. This is a little fiesta or festival in a town in North Italy where every summer they have a day where the older kids teach the younger kids how to make a good ravioli. And if I think back on it, my grandma wanted to make sure I knew how to make this special Norwegian cookie, you know, and it's just something that's really dear to people, is to keep that heritage alive. And you can celebrate that in your travels. This is a humble town in Burgundy where the Chamber of Commerce got together and made these beautiful glass orbs so visitors can enjoy the bouquet of the local wine that's made there. And they're proud of that and they want to show it off. I love the idea that a smart eater can go to a good restaurant in Europe and know what month it is and where they are by what's being served. They don't want to have a big list and serve everything all year long. They go with the seasons and they eat locally. It's called a 0-kilometer meal. It's kind of like the best way to control nature is to obey her. And you have that in the cuisine. It's kind of at one with the earth. And it's tastier that way. Europeans love to pay too much for their loaf of bread in order to buy it from the person who made it. It's this community. And I just think it's a beautiful quality of life thing that a lot of societies have that is weakening in our society. Europeans love and appreciate their fine wine, that's for sure. And they know where to fill it up really cheap. This is a wine filling station. The cheapest liquid you can buy is table wine. And a couple times a year, people bring their car filled with these big jugs, empty, to the wine filling station and go home, and they're all set up. We love our liberty. And there are places that I've been which think they have more liberty even than we have here. This is Cadaqués, the hometown of Salvador Dali. And with all the liberty in Europe, there's a celebration of liberty. There's also a spirit of tolerance and a disinclination to legislate morality. This is a struggle in our society. We are inclined to legislate morality, I think. And everybody in this room is moral, but I bet everybody has a little different morality. And if one person got to make the laws according to their morality, it would impinge on other people's lifestyle. In Europe, they've got a feeling of let's give everybody a little wiggle room. My friends in Europe tell me a society has to make a choice: tolerate alternative lifestyles or build more prisons. And then they always remind me, you Americans lock up 10 times as many people per capita as we do here in the United States. Either you're an inherently more criminal people or there's something screwy about your laws. We're dealing with mass incarceration right now. It's a serious problem. Lock them up, we'll be safer. You could actually get to the point where if you locked enough people up, you'd be getting progressively more and more dangerous in a society. It's counterproductive, most people understand, but the knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people who want to be safe is to lock them up. 3 strikes and you're out. An interesting example of that is drug policy. I've been really outspoken and an advocate for legalizing marijuana, not because I'm pro-pot, but because I'm anti-prohibition, pro-civil liberties and so on. And I've sort of brought my European lessons home. One thing great about traveling is whatever you're curious about, you can see how other societies deal with those challenges, because these are the same challenges that we're all figuring out and struggling with. In Europe, prostitution is something that's a challenge there, and it's a challenge here. In Europe, it's not criminalized. In most countries, it's just gonna happen anyways. So why not unionize? Why not make sure people who are sex workers are checked by a doctor before they get their license so they're not passing diseases? Why not arrange it so if a prostitute has a dangerous client, she pushes her emergency button and she's not rescued by a pimp, but she's rescued by a policeman? You see, that's the ideal. It's not quite that nice, but it's a difficult problem. But they've got less crime, less violence, and less disease in their system than ours. We legislate morality. They believe in pragmatic harm reduction. Pragmatic harm reduction. And you see a lot of these red light zones. The drug policy is a similar sort of thing. A joint in much of Europe is about as exciting as a can of beer. It's not a big deal. They just don't lock people up for it. Statistically, they smoke much less than we do. And you can do hard time for marijuana here in half of our states, So we can learn from each other. Europeans have realized there's not a big reservoir of decent people that would love to ruin their lives smoking pot if only it was legal. People who want to smoke pot do, and they've learned that there's no correlation between how much is consumed and how strict the laws are. So they're into pragmatic harm reduction, and they've decided to not have that hard approach that we have had. We're making a difference now in the United States, and that's a whole different story. But it's, every country has these different challenges. And the big challenge in our society right now is opioid deaths and hard drug abuse. And we're losing tens of thousands of people to overdose deaths. In Europe, they've got the same amount of people struggling with hard drugs, but they don't have hardly any of the overdose deaths because they're not so moralistic about it. They have, this is a shot in a toilet of a restaurant in Zurich. I went into the toilet and blue lights. What's going on? Oh yeah, blue lights. I can't see my veins. You see, it's tough for a junkie to take cover in a restroom and shoot up. So they've got junkies out and about rather than in prison or dead, and they're dealing with a compassionate way. In much of Europe, the word for addicted is enslaved. You see, these are not criminals that need cops and lawyers and judges. They're sick people that need compassion and support and counseling and some nursing, you see. It's enslaved, and they overcome that. You've got across the street a machine that used to sell cigarettes, and now it's rejiggered so it sells syringes, almost free. And we would say, how can you endorse that kind of activity? And they say, hey, they're going to shoot up anyways. Let's make sure they're not spreading HIV. Pragmatic harm reduction. And then down the street, you've got a sad scene, which is a heroin maintenance clinic, government funded, nicknamed a Cafe Fix. And this is where people go to administer their heroin addictions and their opioid problems. Again, we can learn. We can share notes, and we can be, I think, inspired by other societies that are struggling with the same challenges we are as a society that wants to be more compassionate. So when I think about Europe and the United States, I've got a very Eurocentric look at the world. My favorite place to travel is India, and I love, Southeast Asia and Central America and so on in my travels. But as a teacher, I focus on Europe. And I really see the United States and Europe as kind of sister societies. We're basically Christian, affluent, pluralistic. We both believe in government by, for, and of the people. I think a fundamental, I've been trying to figure out what is the difference between Europe and the United States. And part of it is we're government by, for, and of the people via the corporations that we own. Not a judgmental statement, it's just we choose to have our government create a good business environment so that we prosper. In Europe, it's government by, for, and of the people in spite of the corporations they own. The government will speak up for sustainability, for the environment, for poor people, even at the expense of your short-term profit statement. You see, our corporations are, if they're publicly held, they have a legal obligation to profit maximize in the short term. Consequently, we're more inclined to not deal with things that are expensive now, but smart in the long run. When we travel, we can share notes, we can hold each other accountable, and Europe is a great place to go and connect. I love history in my travels, and just there's so many amazing things going on right now in our lifetime, and it's just really fun for us as travelers to be out there and aware that history is unfolding. We're part of it. And to be mindful of the fact that 100 years from now, they're going to look back on our society and be fascinated by what was going on. I happened to be in Berlin on opening day of the new Reichstag building. This is the capital of Germany. It was bombed in the last days of World War II, were fought on the rooftop there, Soviets against Nazis. Amazing to think of it, on the top of their Congress building. It was a bombed out hulk throughout the Cold War. Germany was divided. Government was over in Bonn. Suddenly the Cold War is over. Germany is united, the capital goes back to Berlin. They need a new capital building. In good European style, they don't bulldoze the old building, the bombed out one, they renovate it. And they incorporate into the top of that a beautiful glass dome. And it's free, it's designed for German citizens. Tourists are more than welcome. Walk up that spiral ramp. I was up there on opening day. It's powerful architectural symbolism. It's designed so German citizens can literally look down over the shoulders of their legislators and see what's going on in their desk. They've been jerked around too much in the last century by their politicians. They're going to physically keep an eye on them now. I was up there on opening day, surrounded by teary-eyed Germans. Anytime you're surrounded by teary-eyed Germans, something exceptional is going on. Something exceptional is going on. What is the deal? Well, with the opening of this building, it was the symbolic closing of a very difficult chapter in the history of a great nation. No more division, no more communism, no more fascism. A united country starting a new century with a new Capitol building looking into a promising future. Today, Germany dominates Europe in so many ways. Many of those teary eyes were old enough to remember Berlin when it was just rubble in the late 1940s. Wow, that was exciting to be there, to be mindful of that. And I remember looking around at the other Americans up there, and it occurred to me not one of them had a clue of what was going on. They just were completely missing the excitement of the event. They were thinking, why didn't they air condition this place? Where can I get a Coke? My battery's almost out. All these kind of concerns. And it saddened me. I thought, I'm living in a dumbed down society. I don't want to live in a dumbed down society. I really believe powerful forces in our world here would find it more convenient, more profitable if we were all dumbed down, and they would push us that way if we let it happen. I vowed then and there as a travel writer to expect my travelers to be smarted up, to be engaged. You make more money off of people when you dumb them down. Take them to the beach, frequent flyer miles, duty-free shopping, what's the power of your sunscreen, all that kind of stuff. That's okay, but if it bullies you out of a meaningful experience, you've really lost an opportunity to broaden your perspective and become better connected with our world in your travels. And it's just a lost opportunity. We have that opportunity in our travels to learn, and in so many cases, history is speaking to us. If I look at this photograph here, this is Munich, around 1930 or something, and a little bit bigger crowd than this, but just a room full of decent people that were afraid and frustrated and looking for somebody who could give them promises, who could lie really convincingly and repeatedly, who could make complicated issues sound easy, who knew how to take advantage of the social media of the day, who could scapegoat, who could capitalize on your fears. This man came in and took the most poetic and sophisticated country, arguably in Europe, and derailed its democracy and led it into a horrific war. It's amazing. I just made a TV show about the lessons of fascism in Europe in the 20th century, and sadly, it's so timely because history is speaking to democracies all over the Western world, in Britain, in Poland, in Hungary, in Turkey, and even in the United States. We've got to learn from history, because when you look at how Mussolini came to power in Italy as a fascist, it was like he's reading out of a playbook that any wannabe dictator could read out of. Just do that, do that, do that, do that. And if you look how these autocrats are making their way through democracies all over the West today, it's the same checklist. If you get a chance to see my Rick Steves Fascism in Europe show, you can watch any of my shows anytime free on my website. Just go to ricksteves.com, go to the TV section, and click. You can see the Fascism show, you can see the Iran show, the Holy Land show. In a couple of weeks, you'll have my Hunger show there. My Luther show, I did a show on the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. Christmas in 7 different countries around Europe, you name it, it's all there. And it's just fun to be able to share those. But Europe paid a big price, I'll tell you. I was talking about a smart society versus a dumbed down society. Germany knows what happens when you have a society that can be easily led astray by a con man. They paid the price. Today, Germany invests in its electorate to be engaged and educated, not by any political party's interest, but just in general to be a sophisticated electorate. Our society, I think, is doing just the opposite. It's a complicated world. There are no simple solutions. And we need to be engaged, not just go shopping. Europe learned a lot in the last century. 2 great wars. First World War, half of all the men of fighting age in France were casualties. We hardly can imagine that. We lost 65,000 people in Vietnam, a massive country of 200 or 300 million people. France, with a quarter of our population, lost that many people in a month many times. You know, it's just amazing what Europe went through in World War I. I just, you know, with the 100th anniversary of World War I, 1918 and so on, there's a lot of very interesting stuff going on in Europe. And I was going to these sites because I'm really interested in that kind of history. And I'm kind of, you know, who was right? Who is the winner? Who is the loser? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? And when you go to these great museums in Europe about World War I, there's no good guys or bad guys. It's not Germany was bad and France was good or anything like it. It's just we are now comrades in arms fighting for peace. France and Germany are committed to peace. And you see the French flag and the German flag side by side with the European flag. And if you understand the context of the European Union in the bloodshed of World War I and World War II, you look at that European flag and you just go, thank God for the EU. You can laugh about the EU's political correctness. You can laugh about its cumbersome 17 languages and everything. You can, all of its regulations and so on. But the economies of France and Germany are woven together, and there'll never again be a massive war in Europe like they had twice in the last century. For that reason alone, I think the EU is a real success. It's very exciting to follow. So in the rubble of World War II, community leaders got together and thought, we got to do something dramatic here, or our children are going to be digging out again. And they said, we got to make a United States of Europe, weaving our economies together. It was a stuttering evolution, or it has been, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Every time there's a step back, from our perspective, it seems like Europe's falling apart. Today, I think, is Brexit Day, right? I mean, is that the end of the EU? No, it's the end of England in the EU, but the core of the EU is there. The question is, how big will the EU be and so on? Britain apparently should not be in it. All right, but Britain is here to stay, that's for sure. Britain needed to weave the economies together of the 2 leading countries that were always fighting each other, and it also needed to create a big free trade zone to compete with other big free trade zones like the United States and emerging economies in Asia, India, and China. And that's one of the rationales for the European Union. But it's tough to talk proud sovereign nations into giving up real sovereignty in the interest of union. And you know, you can't have union without giving up sovereignty. Europe's a great laboratory for seeing how societies put themselves together. You got a society that really works hard, but they also really play hard. You know, Europe produces about what we produce, 17 to $20 trillion of stuff a year. And they have 100 million more people than we have. So people in our country who are a little bit, want to put Europe down, say, look, we produce much more per person than they do. The complete analysis is, but Europeans work 20% less, willingly having 20% less stuff. It's not right or wrong, but they choose to work less to have more time with their families. It's a societal choice. By any honest measure, Western European workers and the United States workers make about the same per hour. They just choose to work less than us. I don't know about you, but I was raised, my parents told me this is the work ethic. They never said this is a work ethic. It is the work ethic. My Norwegian relatives have a different work ethic. My Spanish friends certainly have a different work ethic. Europeans have a different work ethic. It's exciting to have our norms challenged in our travels. Every country has its own passions, its own celebrations, its own 4th of July. Switzerland on August 1st, Norway May 17, France on Bastille Day. And every country has its own dreams. It's so exciting to step away from our ethnocentricity and realize that everybody is equal. These are Sri Lankans. They've got the Sri Lankan dream. My Bulgarian friends have the Bulgarian dream. It's different. It doesn't mean ours is any less. It's not unpatriotic to acknowledge that people have a different dream than ours. I was in Cuba on New Year's Eve a few years ago, and it really was glaring to me, the difference between, we live in parallel worlds. The elites in Cuba were spending $100 to be on the rooftop of the hotel, to be there at midnight, and $100 in a land where people make $50 a month. You know, $100 just for the party favors and the drinks. And what struck me is, I was up there, I didn't pay, I was just crashing the party, and people did not look very happy. I was with my family, and for most of the night, we were with this man's family. And I told my family, I just want to find a family that's having their own festival. So we had the most incredible evening with them, and their party was one $4 bottle of rum and 3 generations. That's what it was, or maybe 3 bottles of rum, but it was just dirt cheap. They invited us in, we were part of the family. They said, what do you want to drink? I said, a beer, and they said, we only have rum. But it was just great. But the juxtaposition of that, a whole family having a party like that and so much joy and togetherness, and then on the rooftop of the hotel a couple blocks away, people unhappy spending $100 each. It was poignant, and I love that poignancy when I travel. Maybe one of the, I look back on the years I've spent traveling. I never wanted to go to Europe. My parents dragged me to Europe when I was 14 years old to see the piano factories in Germany, because my dad imported pianos, and then to go to Norway to see our relatives. And I remember I was with relatives in Norway on the carpet watching the moon landing, and Neil Armstrong, stepping on the moon. And it occurred to me, I listened to En lite skritte for menneskeheteren and En giant leap for mankind, I listened to it in Norwegian, and I just was struck, even as a little 14-year-old, by how, wow, this is not an American celebration, this is a global celebration. Back home, I think we just think in flying American flags, look what we did, we beat the Soviets. But the whole world was watching and celebrating. And I was thankful to be far away during that and to be reminded that we're a planet together. We're all children of God. Later on in that trip, I was in this park, Frogner Park. And I realized my parents they didn't have a lot of money. They were really dedicated to showing me a good time in Europe. And I was just a kind of a high-maintenance 14-year-old numbskull. And it was expensive for them, and they weren't able to do the things they wanted because they were trying to keep me happy. And I was in the park, and they were just loving me. And then I looked around the park, and I saw other parents loving their kids as much as my parents loved me. It was so cool. I thought, whoa, let me just figure this out. I'm not the center of things. Those parents love their kids as much as my parents loved me. And my parents loved me crazy. And I thought, this world is filled with billions of equally precious children of God, equally lovable, and all that loved by all those parents. It was such a joyful eureka, even for a little 14-year-old kid, that I would not have had I not ventured, or back then I didn't venture, it was force venturing by my parents, but had I not had the opportunity to leave my home. I think we learn a lot about our own world and our own country and our own faith even when we go far from home and we look at it from a distance. I love the notion of looking at my life from far away with other people. And this is, I love this shot. Could be any number of countries, but that love is just as precious as any love between any parent and any child in this room. And how we could diminish that by some kind of propaganda, some kind of ethnocentric determination to feel good about our affluence. It's, especially if you're a person of faith or a Christian who really believes we're all God's children. It's hard to imagine. It's important that we afflict the comfortable a little bit when it comes to that ethnocentrism, when it comes to just loving people and recognizing how everybody is worthy. When you travel, you realize every group of people have spine. It scares me that we might think another country might have enough spine to stand up to us, Countries have a lot of spine. Countries have a lot of spine. And there's struggles going on that we just can't even imagine. I love taking groups around Turkey with my Turkish tour guide. And you don't have a list of famous sites when you're tooling around eastern Turkey in the shadow of Mount Ararat. You're just looking for stuff. And I remember we'd find all sorts of stuff. We came to a stadium filled with high school kids. Park the bus, go in to see what's happening. 200 kids in a dusty middle of nowhere, gathering together in a stadium, having a pep rally. They're singing together, "We are a secular nation," thrusting their fist up in the air. "We are a secular nation." I asked my guide, "What's going on? Don't they like God here?" "Oh no, we love God, but considering the rising tide of Islamic fundamentalism just over the border in Iran, we're having a pep rally for pluralism." Ataturk gave us a constitution in the 1920s that we're very thankful for, and in it, it requires the separation of mosque and state. Ooh, it never occurred to me. Separation of mosque and state. A pep rally for pluralism with a bunch of teenagers in the shadow of Mount Ararat. I wish all of our decision makers, the people who pull all these triggers, could just go on a public bus across Turkey sometime. All those people that make decisions to cut aid to thirsty villages could just walk through a thirsty village and see people carrying water for many hours a day, There's so much you learn when you travel, and I just love that. Especially venturing into Islam. As a person with a Christian heritage, venturing into Islam, that's my favorite tour. We have 40 different itineraries. I'm so committed to our Turkey tour program because it lets my Christian American clientele actually see a moderate, Western-looking, pluralistic Islamic state and realize that, hey, we can work this out together very easily. But when you go to any of these distant cultures, you see beautiful things. I was in a little village in eastern Turkey, and I saw a mother cleaning house and making tea. Her little boy was playing an eagle bone flute, just like they wrote about in the Bible, an eagle bone flute the shepherds would play. And then I heard this same notes from another eagle bone flute over the bluff, and that was the boy's father with the herd just out of sight, playing his eagle bone flute. And I thought, wow, for 2,000 years, shepherds have played the eagle bone flute with the herd, and the son had played the eagle bone flute of the daughter in the home, connecting with that beautiful musical instrument. Later on, I was walking through that town, and there was a bunch of ugly buildings with rebar sticking out of them, just unfinished. And I asked my Turkish friend, I love Turkey, but you should really have a better sense of aesthetics. This is ugly. And she said, well, in Turkey, we don't trust the money in the bank because there's so much inflation and so on. We just want to invest it in a home. And when we get $100, we build another wall and another window and another door because it's our ethic is to leave our children with a home. So we're all gradually building a home for our children. And we have a saying, as a matter of fact, that rebar holds the family together. So when we see what you think is ugly, we see love. Wow. It's just a random little extra credit experience you have when you travel. But when you travel that way, you just get a sense that the world is filled with good people and filled with love. And people who don't travel don't see the world as filled with good people and filled with love. There's wackos in every society, Christian, Muslim, Jewish. It doesn't matter the religion. That happens to be the religion where these people live. You can interpret any scripture like a fundamentalist, meaning I'm right and you're wrong, and you can be violent. But the world is filled with good people. Speaking of which, Archbishop Oscar Romero. I was inspired by Nathan Hale, Ethan Allen, Patrick Henry, patriots wish they had more than one life to give for their country. And then I traveled around the world and I realized every country's got their Nathan Hales and Ethan Allens and impressive patriots. And I love to get myself out of my ethnocentric patron Patrick Henry mode and try to find a contemporary Ethan Allen and a Nelson Mandela, or Archbishop Oscar Romero, all of these wonderful heroes for their struggles, and get caught up in it. It's just a beautiful thing. It's an exercise. And it's a good exercise to let us be with a broader perspective. Archbishop Oscar Romero is a great example of that. Let me just see Jeez, I'm out of time. I'm just going to have to go like movies. These slides are going to be movies now, okay, because I've got 15 more minutes. So, but I guess that's a good plug for my Travel as a Political Act book. I noticed on sale out in the lobby. And this is just a collection of these stories, things that I've learned over decades of traveling with this mindset. And I just want to apologize. I always am unrealistic about how much I can cover in a given amount of time. But Archbishop Oscar Romero stood with the peasants, stood with the landless people. He was condemned as a communist. Well, that's what we condemn from this year, but he just stood by landless peasants. It's so easy to read the Bible through first world eyes, isn't it? We're expert at reading the Bible through first world eyes. But if you're a poor person in a poor country, you're inclined to read the Bible through poor world eyes. And then you take different scriptures more seriously. There's a thing called the Jubilee year, right? Every 50 years you divide the land, you redivide the land, and you forgive the debt. It says so in the Bible. Every 50 years, you redivide the land and forgive the debt. Rich Christians know God must have been kidding. That's just ridiculous. You can't have a society with that. But there's some wisdom to it, I think. Because in Central America, every 50 years, there's a slaughter with the landed elites pushing down the desperate landless peasantry. And you can learn about that. And when they do rise up, they kill their leaders. Be a patriot, kill a priest. That was the bumper sticker. And then, you keep the peasants down. Romero was assassinated, and he rose again as people. There's a stigmata. His people have the stigmata. And, they lost. The churches that were filled with all sorts of joyful liberation theology are now whitewashed. I went down there. I was heading for Central America to be on vacation with my family, Mazatlan. I was fantasizing about a pristine stretch of tropical beach, swept free of local riffraff, just me and my rich white friends. Plastic straps on our wrists, didn't have to dirty our fingers with the local coins, all the margaritas we wanted. It was going to be a great vacation. I really needed this. I was burned out. Then my friend said, Rick, it's the 25th anniversary of the assassination of Archbishop Oscar Romero. We're going to go to San Salvador and march with the peasants. I told my family I'm not going to be any fun on the beach. I've got to go to walk with the people of San Salvador. It's the best travel experience you could have. Cost about the same as a trip to the beach in Mazatlan or Yucatan. Just as safe, but life-changing. Absolutely life-changing. How many Americans would choose that over Cancun? It's kind of perverse, isn't it? But it's an option. You have that option. I just had it. You're going to see it in what I learned in Guatemala and Ethiopia. But I was marching with all those beautiful people, came to this monument in the main square of the capital of El Salvador, And I thought, wait a minute, this is our monument. This is the Vietnam Memorial. Well, it's the same design, they said, but this is our monument. These are our people. 60,000 of them, names chiseled into that black granite, just as many as into your monument. But these are people who died fighting the United States. Maybe they were communists and we need to kill them. That's a different discussion, you know. But that's baggage. A country of 5 or 6 million people that lost as many people as we lost in the entire Vietnam War, fighting so poor people could own land. I was just down there. You can't own land if you're a poor person. To this day, land rights organizers are being killed in Central America. Every country has baggage. We have baggage. We have 9/11 baggage. Think of the stuff we do as a Christian nation because we got hit on 9/11, you know? Every country's got baggage. We should take a little time not expecting people to give us wiggle room because we were hit, but understanding what is their baggage. That's why I went to Iran. I wanted to know what's their baggage. Went there with our TV crew. Amazing experience. We produced this show about 10 years ago. It's as poignant and accurate today as it was 10 years ago with what's going on right now. We could almost go to war in Iran. If you get a chance to watch it again, it's an hour, and it'd be worth an interesting hour. But we were there filming. Under big 8-story tall graffitis, hateful graffitis, stars and stripes, stripes being dropping bombs and the stars being skulls. Down with the USA. Walking under that as an American film crew, awkward. But then I reminded myself that graffiti is older than the people on the streets, and they have a theocracy where they can't, it's not a freedom, they can't change it. So talk to the people. What's the vibe with the people, not their government's propaganda? People are incredibly friendly. I've never been received so warmly on the streets of any country as an American as when I was in Iran. Amazing. Stuck in a traffic jam down there, just silent in the traffic jam. After a while, a man in the next car rolled down his window. He handed over a bouquet of flowers, and he told my driver, "Give this to the foreigner in your back seat and apologize for our traffic." I don't know about Connecticut, but that never happens in Seattle, where I live. Later on, we were in another traffic jam. It was just silent. And suddenly my driver blurted out, "Death to traffic." "Death to traffic?" I said. "I thought it was death to Israel or death to the United States." He said, "Right now it's death to traffic." I said, "Well, why is that?" He said, "Well, here in Iran, when something is frustrating us and out of our control, we say death to that." He's saying damn. That's a rough translation of damn. Damn the traffic. Damn America. Damn Netanyahu. Damn election fraud. Damn Putin. You know, have you ever thought, damn those teenagers? Well, I have. Do I really want them to die and burn in hell for an eternity? Not yet. But it's after midnight, turn down the music, damn those teenagers, you know? So we need to be a little more nuanced in our understanding of these cultural differences. And when you travel there, you understand a little bit, and you see the rich heritage of that culture. And you also better empathize with their baggage. Empathy. I've been thinking about this. Empathy, I think empathy is Christ-like. You know, it's just, empathy to me is something you gain when you travel. Think of the most unempathetic person you can imagine. Somebody who's in the news a lot. Does empathy even come into those kind of a brain? You know, it's not something that kind of a person aspires to. When we meet people, empathy creeps into us. It's such a beautiful thing to creep into you. Empathy. You know, there's empathy. You go to Iran. Iran lost a couple 100,000 people when they were invaded by Saddam Hussein, funded by the United States of America in their Iran-Iraq war. We don't like to think we funded them. You can believe we didn't fund them, but everybody over there figures we did. And the fact is, they've got all these martyrs' cemeteries. They lost 200,000 people. Wow, that's baggage. And to go to that cemetery, it could be outside of any town in Iran, and to see a widow mourning, dressed in black, every Friday, sitting on the tomb of her loved one and weeping for 20 years, 30 years now. That's baggage. We can have empathy for that. What is going on in her head with all the propaganda she's got, you know? On the last day in Iran, a well-dressed professional woman came across the street to me. She said, "Are you an American film crew?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, did this to me, you know, "I want you to go home and tell the truth. We're united, we're strong, and we just don't want our little girls to be raised like Britney Spears." And it occurred to me right then and there how 70 million well-educated Iranians could vote for a guy like Ahmadinejad. They were afraid of regime change. They didn't want the Shah on the throne again like we did in 1953 so we could have their oil. That's what it boils down to. Incursions from the West. That's their baggage. What was Ahmadinejad's base? He only won by 51%. Who voted for him? Was it the sophisticates in the big city? No. They loved the miniskirts in Tehran. It was the small town, less educated fundamentalists, the base of that hateful politician. Small town, less educated fundamentalists. When I think about what's going on in our country, there's a big division. It's not bad people, but the people who are the small town, less educated fundamentalists are good people driven by fear and love. Because that's what this woman was driven by. She was a good person driven by fear and love. If we can overcome our fear and have a little more love, things can work out better. Think of how fearful our country is right now. When I started teaching, people said bon voyage. When was the last time you heard bon voyage? What do people say now? Have a safe trip. We'll pray for you. Do you really think you should be going over there considering all that's happening? Oh my goodness. I spend 4 months a year overseas. My European friends laugh out loud when they hear that Americans are staying home for safety reasons. It's loony. If you love your kids, you'll take them tomorrow if you know the statistics. That's how I sell tours. Fear is for people who don't get out very much. The flip side of fear is understanding, and we gain understanding when we travel. I just feel so strongly that travel is a vital force for peace. It's a vital force for better understanding that this world is one. We're all children of God. We get to God in different ways. But we can get to know each other. We can get to know each other. Okay. My Holy Land show, again, that's really pertinent right now. I went to Israel and Palestine a little while ago, and, you know, I don't have time to talk about it, but it's a 1-hour show on my website. But it's just so important to see things from both narratives. I mean, just today I saw the same piece of wall in the news. It's the same sadness when you've got, you know, you got little Palestinian kids with plastic guns shooting imaginary Jews. That's terrible. And you got little Jewish kids with plastic guns shooting imaginary Palestinians, and that's terrible. And then I think, what was I doing when I was that age? What did my parents give me at Christmas? Guns. Who was I shooting? Their enemies. You know, whether it was Germans or Japanese or communists or whatever, I was shooting my parents' enemies. And in Israel, you've got a wall that keeps the two communities apart so the younger generation can't talk to each other, and they're still not connecting. That wall has a big consequence in keeping people apart. And when you travel, you get enthusiastic about building fewer walls and more bridges. Bridges instead of walls. Look at the European currency, the euro. It's just nothing but bridges. It's a beautiful thing. So you can go to the Holy Land and talk to people on both sides of that wall. You can have guides. There's my Jewish guide and my Muslim guide. And you can realize there's 4 million people in Palestine. These are the people in Palestine. I've been to their university. I've talked to them. They got no access to any water, no waterfront. They've got water tanks on top of their houses so that when Israel turns off the water, they can still dole out a little water. They're living as if in a cage. And when I was there 10 years ago, it was clear to me there's three options. There's a two-state solution with both states having security and being free. There's a one-state solution, which is a democratic, secular, pluralistic state. And there's a one-state apartheid option. I mean, logically, I don't care if you're pro-Palestine or pro-Israel. I'm pro-everybody. I'm honestly as much pro-Israel as Palestine. And I think the best thing you could do for Israel is to give dignity and security to Palestine. Now, those three options, if the two-state option is going away, then you got the option of a pluralistic secular state with 6 million Jews and 6 million Muslims today, and Muslims having a much faster birth rate, or you've got an apartheid state. And I fear that extreme Israelis are working themselves into a corner where they're going to wake up without the pluralistic state. And then they're going to become what they don't want to be. And that's not a pretty future for the only Jewish state on this planet. It's a complicated mess. And I wish there was a little more thoughtfulness in that, and we have to learn about that. So you can check out that show if you want to. I love produce travel material and then share it with teachers and so on. We've got 150 different shows, and I've cut it into 500 different little clips, streamable 3 and 4 minute clips for teachers to use. So you can just go to classroom.ricksteves.com and type in Monet and get 4 different clips from 4 different shows about water lilies and Orsay and so on. I just typed in hunger, and you get all the clips from my new hunger show. It's actually out if you wanted to do that. It's just broken into a bunch of little clips. You could type in Luther, you could type in force-fed geese, you could type in libraries, you could type in whatever, and get all the clips. And it's just really fun for teachers to use. It's called Classroom Europe. And we've got tours on our app, which are fun to share. If you wanted to hear me talk about budget travel tips, you need to go to my website and watch my lecture about that. If you'd like to hear about art for travelers, I've got a 5-hour series of talks on that on my website. And it's just fun for us to share that. It's all free. But what I love to do is spend 4 months a year in Europe, mostly alone, working, making sure that the guidebooks are up to date, and my hotel desk is big enough for my laptop. We're blessed with a beautiful environment, and we're also very aggressive economically. And we're at a turning point now where we have to decide, will we make less money in order to have our grandchildren be able to travel? Because I believe we have a system with our businesses run by publicly held corporations, and CEOs have to follow the dictates of their board of directors, which want to get money now, not later, and as much as possible. I think it's going to be very tough for us to get serious about climate change. As a travel producer, we take 30,000 people to Europe every year on 1,000 different bus tours. I'm making too much money. I should have a carbon tax so my people can travel carbon neutral. It takes $30 smartly invested for one person flying from here to Europe and back to go carbon neutral. Mitigation. You can solve it by not traveling, or you can travel and contribute the bad stuff and spend something to create as much good stuff, and you mitigate. That's for real. So we gave ourselves a self-imposed carbon tax this year of $1 million. 30,000 people times $30 is $900,000, rounded up to $1 million, and we just cut a check for $100,000 to 10 different organizations working in the developing world on climate-smart agriculture to help the poor farmers. Half of humanity is smallholder farmers in the developing world living on $5 a day or less. They're contributing a lot, just like we are, and they can mitigate theirs with some help. So that lets us travel carbon neutral, but we're doing this in a way to try to inspire other travel companies to travel ethically. So it's something you could consider. I don't even have time to show this because we're going to see this show. I was going to give you a little sneak preview about Hope and Hunger, and we will do that after dinner. And I I just love the thought that when people travel, if they're inclined to see the world as one, and if they're inclined to connect in a way that really illustrates how we're all children of God, it enriches that travel experience. And it's something to think about in your travels. It's okay to be a poet. It's okay to be emotional. It's okay to do thoughtfulness in your travels, even if everybody is just heading for the beach. And when you can manage to do that, I think your travels become much richer and much more rewarding. So with that, I think we're going to break for dinner, and I would like to thank you for your attention on travel as a spiritual act. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it would be just great if you have any questions about the show or anything we've talked about today. This is a beautiful time to ask them. Yeah, Bill's got the mic there.
I do. Just trying to get a little more light.
Yeah. That's good.
Oh, sure.
Here we go.
Hi, my name is Sharon D'Amelio. As someone who works for a anti-hunger NGO, I want to thank you for saying that we can end hunger. Most people don't believe that that's true, and we absolutely can. So, number one, thank you. We do similar work to what you were showcasing here in your show, and I'm interested to hear, so, many US NGOs and the US government, when we work in developing countries and we see the problem of hunger, we invest in farmers. Training, seeds, access to water, and land. In our own country, when we address hunger, we've largely done that through charitable food and food banks and programs like SNAP that provide access to food, but not the ability to grow your own food. And I'm wondering what you think the US has to learn in policy and in practice from the developing world.
First of all, it's true. We need to just raise awareness that it is realistic to end hunger. We're not going to end poverty, like I said. We're going to end extreme poverty and hunger. And that was something that the NGOs I was working with all were in concert on that idea. And it's a matter of raising awareness and having a esprit de corps here. Your question about in the United States, I think to summarize what you said, a lot of times we'll just provide food for hungry people, but in the developing world, we support farmers to grow food. Historically, the bad kind of well-meaning charity that caused dependency and demoralized local farmers was just buying up our excess food and shipping it over there and putting it on the dock. And then this country whose farmers are the hungriest people, they're demoralized to the point where they don't even plant their seeds because everybody just goes and picks up the free food. That's the old-fashioned bad kind of aid that is not done anymore. I mean, it's totally discredited. And now what they're learning is it's best to give, not even, you see, I've lobbied in Washington, D.C. for different things for Bread for the World, and there's so much self-interest in America's traditional aid. You got to use, I think there's something called the Jones Act or something, where you've got to use our shipping companies if you're going to send aid over there. So, 15, 20% of your aid goes to enrich our shipping companies. And then you're buying the food from our farmers. It's not appropriate. You saw Pedro, they don't even eat those snap peas. They've got their own food that they want to have. So the smart aid now is sending cash from the rich world to organizations in the developing world that can responsibly allocate that cash to bolster local development. And I just think that's exciting. Ethiopia does a thing where it's called something like cash for labor. And Ethiopia is divided into all those small units. And from the top, they'll say, okay, we've got cash. You've got to have work brigades that are going to terrace the land and bolster the water table and plant trees. And when you do that, we will distribute to you the cash that's coming from the rich world to help you then have enough money to make your farmers viable as small businessmen. So it's really smart in the developing world, and I don't even know what's going on in the United States. But there's a case for charity. Charity is for emergencies. But what you want to do is have development. That was my favorite word in this. Everything, I use development. This is development. That's what development looks like. This kickstarts development, and then the ball rolls. People want to, I heard it over and over again, people want to work hard and export. They want to get into the game. But you got to remember, in the developing world, in most of those countries, there's not any way to get clear title to the land. There's not a stock market, so you got to be really well connected and a big shot even to own businesses. People can't invest in it. And we have to have the infrastructure for development. And that's what's so exciting. And it's way beyond the attention span of the average citizen. And understandably so. Your eyes glaze over when you, I'm no wonk in this stuff. But the more I learn about it, the more I just think, man, there's potential here. Like what I really like was for Pedro, an NGO got him a small loan and a lawyer. Because you need a lawyer to go to the big city and get clear title to that land. And then he gets to grow his peas instead of working with a machete in the coffee plantation. And he actually pays off his loan, and then he has that land free and clear. But he wouldn't have had that land free and clear unless an NGO in the United States equipped him with a lawyer. I didn't have a chance to put in so many things I wanted to put in the show. One of us a visit to a land rights group. I alluded to that in my earlier talk. We visited a land rights group in Guatemala. 5 of their colleagues had been killed in the last year, because you don't advocate for landless farmers to get land rights. That's just, you don't go there because the rich elites want to own the land. If you're a small farmer that has a little, it's cash cropping, which means the big companies have the buying power, so they get more and more. I forget if I used it in the script, but a line I like is, if you really think of the free market as your like religion, then what you're embracing is the idea that if my cat has more buying power than your child, my cat gets the tuna and your child goes hungry. That's free market. That's capitalism right there without any parameters set. And the reality is now with cash cropping, the elites own the big land and they don't want to grow rice and beans to feed their own population, because that's not what an elite does. An elite's going to kick the local people off the land and grow crops for export to make some serious money, you see. And then consequently, they own all the land and nothing is produced for local people to consume. So you got nothing, no land to own, no land to farm on, only a big plantation to work on, and then you got to buy food in tin cans imported from the other countries because all of your food is for export. It's a vicious cycle of structural poverty. So you get pushed and pushed and pushed, these small farmers, and then let's say you've got a farmer, small humble farmer growing coffee beans to send onto that big work plantation there. One day the palm oil people come to you and knock on your door. Hi, we want to buy your land. And we can negotiate with you, or we can negotiate with your widow. That's the phrase, And what's the small farmer going to do? He doesn't have any lawyers. He doesn't have any clout. He doesn't want to get disappeared. So he signs the thing. The palm oil company gets the land, and he's back on the plantation. Structural poverty. I had to be really careful to rein in my radicalism on this show, as you can kind of know, because if I talked like that, it would get shut down. So even in public television, we have to self-censor in our world today. But this show is pretty accessible. It's going to run in the most conservative corners of our country.
Hello, everybody. Hello. My name is Priscilla Chavez Lara. I just wanted to get a clarification. I think I heard, after you were talking about refugees, that migrants threaten security of the wealthy countries. Just wasn't sure if that was accurate or me mishearing things.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said. What did I say?
Migrants are threatening...
migrants, oh yeah.
Migrants threatens the security of the wealthy countries?
Right. I said this could be the beginning of a flood of migrants. And was that in the context of climate change? I think it was. Conflict. When you have conflict and when you have climate change, it shakes apart development and it derails people's hope. And people in the countryside oftentimes will go to the big city, or they will migrate to a country with the promise of jobs. And then I think we showed that caravan heading north and that scary scene on the border. And I was down there when our president declared he was going to cut $400 million in aid to 4 countries in Central America. For some reason, he was upset with the path of the migrants. And I saw the disillusion on the face of the NGOs and the hard workers there, just as they were starting to get some traction in their development, through the help of American money, that now that hope, those roots, that reason for the young generation to stay on the farm and not go to the big city or not go to the north was undercut. And I just thought, it's a backwards thing to do if you don't like migrants, to pull the rug out from under their development. If you don't want migrants, I believe you should invest in development there. Time and time again, I heard migrants say, we don't want to go to the United States. We don't like the food there. They want to stay here and work, if they have a condition where you can work. But if you don't have any condition to work, if it's too dangerous with those gangs and so on, you go to the United States, or you go to Europe if you're in that hemisphere. So that's what I was implying. I think I was also doing it in the context of climate change, because we're so afraid of migrants, and we don't know what migrants are right now. When we get 2 generations from now, we're going to have 50 million or 100 million climate refugees. And then we're going to know what migrant problems are. And these, you can't build a wall big enough to keep desperate people out. And if we don't deal with it now, it haunts me how we, as a country, would defend ourselves against tens of millions of refugees. Would we nuke people, or would we help them? You know, I don't know what we would do, but I don't think we would be very compassionate if we were invaded by millions of refugees. It's a scary future if you don't like refugees when you look at climate change.
Rick, I have a question. You're a travel guy. People relate to you and they know you, they feel like they know you. You're saying, okay, the implications of my travel are that I want to ask these kind of questions. How's that being received?
Oh, with my audience?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people, constantly people say, just talk travel. Stop talking politics. Stop talking religion. Stop making everything heavy, you know? I just had 100 of my guides. I'm a little bit hoarse because we had our annual guide summit, and I've got 150 guides that come to Seattle for a week-long seminar. And we have this big huddle, and then they go back and they take all of our tours around Europe. And I just gave them a 2-hour address about techniques for guiding. And part of it was the typical tour company in Europe says, don't talk politics and don't talk religion. I want my guides to talk politics and religion in a respectful way. There's a way to do it. And I've been doing that for 20 years now. I've written a book called Travel as a Political Act. And people tell me, why are you talking about travel? Well, I write a book called why are you talking about politics, you know? I've been outspoken on drug policy reform. I helped Washington legalize marijuana. I paid for it. I was the spokesperson. I was the nice guy that actually promoted this, confusing a lot of people. And we legalized it. I'm so proud of that. Not because it's pro-pot. It's civil liberties. It's anti-racism. It's take the power away from gangs and organized crime. There's many reasons to stop the prohibition against marijuana. That was something I learned in Europe, and I came home, and as a caring citizen who's got a platform, it's good for me to do that. There's a lot of good causes that are easy to embrace, but a lot of people are afraid to embrace this because they can get voted out of office or they can get fired. Nobody can vote me out of office or fire me. I can blame my European friends, and I can say what I think is the truth about a very important issue in our country. Every once in a while somebody says, Rick Steves, I know what you think about marijuana. We're not going to take your tours, and we're not going to buy your guidebooks. And all I can think is Europe is going to be more fun without you. That's a long-winded answer, but I've spoken out against things I care about, like a war, from a traveler's point of view. And I've had people say to me in front of my building, I bet if you knew what that cost your bottom line, you wouldn't have spoken out against the war. And I just can't believe somebody that would support a war factoring in what it would mean to their bottom line. I'm fortunate I can say what I think in a respectful way and call it travel. But for 20 years, I've had the microphone and the bully pulpit on my buses, with half of the bus filled with people who are on one side of the aisle and half on the other. And I've worked very hard on being respectful and not abusing the bully pulpit. And I think it's okay.
Thank you. I want to make a comment and then ask a question. New Haven has a connection to Antigua, Guatemala, because for the last, I think, 4 years, an artist from there has come up here and helped people make these huge, giant puppets for the Day of the Dead parade. I don't know if anyone has participated in that. But you can, starting in October, you can go down to the warehouse and help them make the puppets. My question was about mission trips. Sometimes groups will spend, $10,000 or $20,000 on airfare to go down and spend a week or two doing some labor, and I wondered what you think of that.
That's a very important issue. There's a lot of people, to me stewardship is an important word. If you care about something, are you a good steward of the money you're putting into it and your time and so on? I organized tours to go down to El Salvador and Nicaragua back in the 80s, and whole busloads I would organize to go down with an educational tour company, and we all struggled with this because I think Mother Teresa would have said, maybe it's better for you to invest that money in poor people instead of you spending 5 years local wages to go down there and meet these people. It's a good point. I would say it just comes with a stewardship responsibility. If you're going to spend that much money and go down there and take photographs and have a great experience and roll up your sleeves and help out a little bit, it's your prerogative. But if you want to do it in a totally ethical way, I would say when you fly home, you should take your perspective, your new broadened perspective, and utilize it as a citizen of this country. That makes the almost obscene from a local person's point of view investment of going down there and back actually a very ethical thing to do, because once you've gone down there, you come home and you realize when you step into the privacy of the voting booth, who wins this election affects people south of the border more than it does me and you. I mean, I'm sort of haunted by the fact that good, caring Christian Americans will go into that booth and just vote what's good for me. And I am so keenly aware that it's both good for me. I mean, our president now is best thing for my bottom line. It's obscene how much I've made on tax cuts from this, But am I going to vote because of that? Or am I going to vote for what's good for the future, what's good for poor people, what's good for the environment, what's good for south of the border? You can imagine what I would want to vote for. Is that enlightened or is that wacko? Well, some people think it's wacko. I think it's just good style. I think it's honest. There's a lot of tourism. There's some bad whatever you call this kind of tourism, where you go down there and see an orphanage, and you can go down there and help build a little clinic or something like that. My church goes down with the youth group 4 times a year and builds a house in Tijuana. I think it's a better experience. If you're looking at what is the net value of that, it's great to build a house for somebody, but it's much better to have all those people-to-people connections. It's much better to have young people from our country go south of the border and have that vivid first-hand experience. It's a big responsibility for the people who organize that trip to make sure that it's transformational travel, not feel-good tokenism. I'm also interested in development or compassion philanthropy 201 instead of 101. Compassion 101 is okay. If you want to spend $20 a month to feed some poor kid in Kenya and have his or her photograph on your mantle, and if that makes you feel really good about having your affluent life, it's better than nothing. But I'm beyond that. And for me, the ultimate in thoughtful, effective philanthropy is being an active citizen when it comes to shaping our government. That's why I really support advocacy. Every dollar I give to Bread for the World makes, to me, I'm convinced, personally, I just believe this, makes many, many times more value than any dollar I could give to Oxfam or something like that. Am I against giving to Oxfam? Of course not. I mean, my guides were so inspired by watching this that they want to build a well. So it'll cost $4,000 for my guides to build a well. That's beautiful, So the fun thing about philanthropy is you can choose what turns you on. I'm really into affordable housing. I'm really into advocacy. I'm really into empowering women. I'm really into whatever, you see. And I just think it's exciting to be activated and invigorated by that. But there is feel-good wasteful, bad stewardship when it comes to trips to the developing world. And that would be up to every consumer to, you're not going to help a lot. Is it wrong? Well, no, because you spend the same amount going on a cruise or going on to a golf resort in some country that doesn't have any water in its fields. So, I mean, we blow money like nobody's business in our world. So you can't lose sleep over that. It's just be aware that for the cost of, that cosmetic surgery that gave you such a beautiful smile, you could drill a well and an entire village of mothers wouldn't have to walk for 3 hours a day to get water for their kids. Is it wrong to get that cosmetic surgery? No. Is it more exciting to be sophisticated in your consumption and know how to consume vicariously? See, I consume vicariously. I have consumed enough where if I consume more, I'm not happier. Absolutely not happier. I've got enough, but am I going to go out there mindlessly consuming more? No. I know that there's other people steep on the learning curve whose life I can better by taking some of that excess where I'm unable to enjoy consuming, let them consume it, and then I consume it vicariously. It gets more traction for my hard work and what I have. And in a weird kind of fun way, it's selfish because I'm getting more bang for my buck that I earn by traveling all around the country and selling tours, you see. So it's just a thoughtful thing to be into.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jessie Dong. I study the sociology of documentary film, so I'm particularly interested in, your filmmaking, which I'm, to be honest, not very familiar with. But I guess my question is, very generally, what led you to begin making documentary films? And there are two sub-questions related to that. The first being, how does it relate to your own sort of desire for advocacy work, and how did the two compare? Your making documentary films compared to your sort of tourism. And then the second question is, and you've alluded to this already, in the beginning you said that you wanted to portray this film as 95% hope and 5% sort of suffering and sadness. And you also said how you had to portray the film in a certain way that downplayed your own personal radicalism. So can you talk a bit more about how you go about framing your films, so that they can be publicly broadcast, and also so that they're as effective as possible for what you want to convey?
Well, I didn't sleep on the plane last night. That was a very long question. So give me these in very short sentences and I'll answer all four of them in a row. What was the...
Okay, so can you talk about why it is you went about making documentary films?
Okay, good. I make these documentary films because they're more challenging and rewarding than making another show about hiking in the Alps. My main thing is I produce a TV series every 2 years. I have for 30 years. Every 2 years for public television. It's 12 or 13 new shows, and we've got that coming up every fall. Every 2 falls we have that. So that's my main thing, and I love to do that. But it's, for me, I have this platform, and it started out, I think, I wanted to show a sacred, non-commercial Christmas. I can do it because I have the money, nobody pays me to make these shows, and I give the shows for free. So, and I have public television, so I can do whatever I want. If it's good and people watch it, they'll run the next one. And so I wanted to celebrate sacred, non-commercial Christmases with tradition, humanizing it and making it just beautiful without Santa Claus in 7 different countries in Europe. Great, I did it. It was something that was challenging, it was fun. I love the fact that we get all excited when we hear Gershwin or John Philip Sousa or Aaron Copland because we're Americans and they're Americans. And I'm also aware that in Norway, they don't care about those guys. They like Edvard Grieg. And in Vienna, they get excited about the waltz. And in Italy, they stand on their chairs and sing in unison at the aria with Verdi. So what I did was I made a 1-hour concert, which starts with our Star Spangled Banner, and we all feel good. And then I say, now my responsibility as your tour guide is to take that beautiful if ethnocentric emotion on the road, and we go to 7 different countries in Europe, and we celebrate what turns them on, remembering of what turns us on, so we are less little ethnocentric in our music. A goofy, eccentric thing, but it was all music from the same generation, tying in with nationalism in the 1860s and 1870s. And it was a great show, And now I'm going around, I just was at the Boston Pops doing it for 2 sold-out shows, and I just go all over the country doing that symphony. It's just something it needs to be said, and I can say it. I went to Iran after we bombed Baghdad. And I thought, I want to show the Iran and the people of Iran without some 60 minutes, let's uncover the terrorism kind of approach, just humanize Iran. So these are special projects of mine. I had to watch those boring Martin Luther shows in black and white when I was a kid at church. I wanted to make one in color that was really fun. So, and we had the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. It only comes once every 500 years, so I wasn't going to miss that one, so I made a 1-hour special on it. And, I was worried about fascism. I was worried about fascism during Bush, but I didn't have the wherewithal to but we got this show together now, and it's so timely. It's a 1-hour show on fascism, so I just can do it. It's fun, it's a challenge, and it's the mission of public broadcasting. One more part of your question, if there was another one.
So I'm wondering, because you describe it as it being something that's sort of fun for you, or a project or something that you can do, but do you consider documentary film and its reception to be as effective or on par with sort of people going on your tours?
Well, I think what I remember you saying was you can give money for advocacy or you can put energy into producing a documentary.
No, not really that, but just for someone, say, to go on your tour versus someone to watch your film. Do you have in mind the difference in how effective one or the other would be?
Should you go on my tour or you should watch my show? Well, both.
But what changes people's lives?
That's it. What changes people's lives? We believe in things, we care. We live in a wealthy, we're powerful, we're free, there's a lot of need. Why wouldn't you, if you were a tour guide or a travel writer or a TV producer, do something that mattered? When I have my radio show, it airs on 400 stations for an hour every week on public radio. If my publisher gets me talking with somebody that doesn't really matter, I have to do it without pouting, but it's just not that interesting. But if I get to talk to somebody whose work really is engaging and challenging and making a difference, I love it, you see. So it's just, I'm thankful that I get to work in something that's meaningful. I don't think there's enough jobs like that for everybody, but if you happen to land a job that you believe in, it's a real blessing.
Yeah. Jerry, did you?
Thank you. I was wondering if there's a way to also, not instead of, but to also include areas in the United States where people are in similar economic hungry situations, to drive home the point of the globalization or a sense of being worldwidely connected as neighbors. And it might help people in the U.S. to not see this as just a problem over there, but it's a
Right.
worldwide problem.
That would have been really good to be able to do that, yeah. There were many things I wanted to do in this show that I couldn't do. As I was just listening to it tonight, I was just noticing how, because I remember writing the script and I wanted to say a little more phrase here, but there just wasn't time, literally, for another phrase in that show. If you're making a TV show, I used to think you could just talk faster, but it doesn't work that way. This is really dense as it is. So there's a lot of things I wanted to talk about. It would have been nice to tie in similar, parallel struggles in the United States. For me, I'm kind of just dabbling in this. Now that I've done this, everybody's coming at me to do all sorts of things as a follow-up, but people are still coming at me with, why didn't you go to our country on your Christmas show? If you do that, people, I'm flattered by it and I'm glad, but I don't know. I'm not going to be some hero for this. The woman from the ACLU who was my partner in legalizing marijuana, now they're going to legalize all drugs, which is the next step in the same rationale. There's a good case to be made for it, and I'd love to do that, but I just told her my plate is full. It's just, you got to know when to say no. But I think that'd be great. I wish somebody would. And I'm no expert in this stuff. I just learned, and I had great people supporting me. You could see how smart the woman from the World Food Program, to be walking with her and see her work. Oh, it was an inspiration. And I got to walk with people in the trenches over there. And to hear people here just say, oh, they're paying their CEO too much money. You know what I mean? The knee-jerk cynicism that comes to compassion that has a dollar sign on it. People complain, but then what do? Nothing. They just complain, and that gets them free from having to make a difference. Frankly, I don't care if the CEO is overpaid. I want to make a difference. Philosophically, I think they should pay their CEO well. You know, it's a big responsibility and it's a lot of work. But if you could walk with those people, and if you could walk with the locals who are empowered and then having the dignity to work and export, it's the most beautiful thing. A lot of times my crew and I say, if we could just have our viewers right here with us, that would change their lives. Our challenge is, the reality is, most people don't want to, they don't have the money to, it's just out of their reach. So our challenge is to bring it home in a 1-hour TV show and do as much as we can as the same beautiful, empowering experience to be there in person, which is not realistic. Having said that, I'm a big supporter of reality tour companies, educational tour companies. When I go to Central America, I usually go with an organization at Augsburg College in St. Paul, Minnesota, called the Center for Global Education. And they take people down there, and they're just wonderful. I love the Center for Global Education. Even when I go alone, I hire, like for us in Guatemala, I just hired a private Center for Global Education tour. We had a minibus and the escort that would take anybody that wanted to go with them. But that, if you really want to have that experience, people can go there. They can have the experience I had if they really want to.
Sorry, I don't see. Oh, right here. I'm not seeing. Oh, sorry.
Thanks. My name is Anne. I'm also in the sociology department. In sociology, we kind of have a working thesis about the reason why Americans are so individualistic is because of the influence of Protestantism in our country. I'm interested in how...
The influence of what?
Protestantism.
Oh, Protestantism, yes.
And I'm interested in knowing what you think the shift, what would it take to shift our culture from being individualistic to being more community-oriented, like you spoke about in Europe? You know, the sociologist argument would be then, well, they were Catholic for longer. But that's not really maybe as convincing as I'd like to hear what you have to think.
What was the argument you said? I missed that. What was
well, this German social theorist Max Weber says, well, they were Catholic for longer, which is why they're more community-oriented. Oh. Well, in America, we started out as Protestant, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I love the community. Socialism, you know, social-ism. My favorite country in Europe is Italy. And I think it's because, I think I mentioned that. They've got the piazza, you know? It's just a beautiful thing. In Central America, mi casa, su casa. I mean, I found when I went to Central America, I and my friends have a mindset of scarcity. You know, we have to ensure this, we don't want to take that risk and everything. In Central America, poor people have a mindset of abundance. If they've got it, they'll give it to you. I mean, that's not fantasizing, that's the way it feels when you're there. I think if everybody traveled, if you had to have a passport before you could vote, we'd have a different electorate. You know, you go to Europe, we go to Europe and we see these people are not miserable socialists. They're very effective capitalists that have more of a social ethic. And you know, you can have that nice marriage of socialism and capitalism. It's all just, you got to calibrate it for your society. I mentioned the work ethic. I mentioned they produce as much per hour but less per person. It's a choice a society makes. And in the United States, we're just hell-bent on working ourselves into an early grave so we can get as much stuff as we can. I don't know, I'm not a socialist, I'm not a sociology student. I'm a good capitalist, by the way, but I just am a real fan of socialism. I want to be taxed, and you know, we have big bad government or good little government. In Europe, they have a third option, big good government. Nobody wants to pay taxes to a bad government, and if the government can use your money smartly, and if you care about your community, it's a good investment, it's smart. You can make that case, but it needs to be made eloquently. I wish our politicians talked about things a little more eloquently and a little more broad instead of trying to win one slice of the electorate in this little state, you know. But I think if people traveled more, they'd be less afraid of communities that work together. When I have a tour group in Scandinavia, I sit down with my cousins in the city hall and we have a roundtable discussion. So well, how do you Scandinavians so docilely pay such high taxes? And they say, well, what's it worth to live in a country where there's no homelessness, where there's no hunger, where everybody's got access to quality health care and education, regardless of the wealth of their parents? Is that radical, or is that just a successful society? Here, that would be radical. Over there, that's just common sense. I didn't get to finish my slides, but I noticed one slide I wanted to show before we had dinner time was a guard. And down in Central America, there's a guard, an armed guard in front of every pharmacy, in front of every hotel, and in front of every bank. And I say, you know, in my travels, I've learned that even if you're motivated only by greed, if that's all you care about is your family's financial well-being and security, if you know what's good for you, you don't want to be filthy rich in a desperately poor world. It's just not a nice place for your kids. Even if you can afford that designer fortification and barricade yourself safely in this and be the rich person, it's a failing society. And when you lose your middle class, if you wonder what it's like to lose your middle class, go to Guatemala and look around. You know, it's the trajectory that I think we're on. And we got to be careful because it's not a place you want to go, even if you can make the cut and be in the upper, what's left of the upper class. So that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of Americans. But we need to look at that because you learn a lot by going south of the border.
Let's do a couple more questions and then break for baklava.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for all of your programming throughout the years. You've literally changed our lives. For years, you know, after growing up, and you know, we're educated, and we had a certain belief that America, which I would call it propaganda, that we were brought up to believe in, that this was the best country in the world. Our kids fought in the military for many years, signed up after 9/11. We were frightened to travel by our children being in the military and kind of being on the inner circle and telling us the secrets and things, you know, that terrorism was going to happen here, and they had a kind of front row seat. Then you opened up our minds. And so we dared to go to places like, you know, Norway, and then we expanded and drove across. But we wanted to, well, for example, is we were afraid to go there because, you know, because it was expensive, and, you know, we thought we'd have to do a cruise ship. That's not our thing. And we never felt that you encouraged us to just travel by doing your tours. You taught us to travel by becoming a local. Shopping local, we go. People think we live there. We know where to shop. We ask the locals where to eat. So then, eventually, after going back to some of the same places, we started even going to local churches, trying something different than ours, which we were taught here, not a good thing. You don't go outside your local parish. And we started getting involved in the charities there. And then we had our world turned upside down, as you have said to everybody. We thought we were the best givers in the world. We thought we were the most philanthropic. We thought we were the best at everything, and we found out we weren't. So what we did try doing, so this is my question, we want to be better stewards of our money in giving. We've seen it firsthand. When immigration does not work is when, like you said, people want to get out of a war-torn country. When they cannot get a visa into America, they have to make a stop in Norway, and we've seen the changes over the last few years, which are drastic. Our church in Ireland has been turned upside down because people can't get a visa here. They have to stop in those countries where they don't want to be. They get a stipend to live there. Oh, yeah, the kids won't go to school. So with all of your doing this documentary, where can we, if you can, give us some organizations, even if it's on your website, that we can give to that promote these values that we share with you? I mean, we are passionate about it.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm so glad that the show inspires people to want to make a difference. And I think the most important thing we can recognize is our influence in our own circles as caring people, you know, thankful to be Americans, but wanting to be proud of our country in the family of nations. And to educate ourselves on these issues and then to challenge people on these issues in a thoughtful way makes a huge difference. My choice is advocacy, you know, empowering people to lobby for these issues in the halls of Congress. Lobbying has a bad reputation because we think of it as lobbying for something we don't like, guns or who knows what you don't like, but there's a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. lobbying for that, and you don't like lobbyists. I don't like hunger. I like development in the poor world. There are people lobbying against hunger and for development in the poor world, and that's good lobbying. They call it advocacy because that's a better term, but they're lobbying against hunger. And man, politicians want to do the right thing, but they don't know the importance of a lot of this, and they need somebody to push them. And advocacy makes a huge difference. So look into advocacy. I'm careful not to go around. I don't want to be a spokesperson for different organizations because there's a lot of great organizations in this show that I pointedly didn't even put I put the title next to the person's name, but I didn't mention the organization because how do I know that's the best one? These are ones that I like. But advocacy, to me, is the most effective thing we can do if we want to make a difference with our dollars, and that would be bread for the world. Otherwise, if you want to just support an NGO, what turns you on? It needs to be joyful for you, you know. I support a library in Palestine. You know, I gave a lot of money to a library in Palestine that gives kids a cultural alternative that's not political, run by Reverend Miti Rahab. He runs the Bethlehem Lutheran Church in Bethlehem, or the Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem. It's an amazing organization if you read what he does. There's an organization in the United States called Bright Stars of Bethlehem that supports the library for kids so that Muslims and Christians in Palestine have something other than political anger to do with their teenage years. I like water, and there's a group called Water First International, one of lots of organizations. I've given speeches for them. I know the people that run it in Seattle. It's a great group, but it builds wells, and the churches in the Seattle area support them, and it just builds water infrastructure. The smart thing is they don't just throw a well at them. The wells are owned by the community, and everybody pays an annual due to collectively keep it up. You have to empower people by having them own it, not just give it to them, you see. So there's this new, more sophisticated kind of development aid. Agros is the organization that has lawyers and loans so people can own their land free and clear. A good development agency wants to get out of the way as soon as they can. Agros helps somebody until they're up and running. Pedro's got his land free and clear. His family will have it, his sons will have it, and Agros is now no longer connected with him. But there's, on my website, I always have a landing page for the TV shows that list the different organizations I've worked that I like. But I just don't, I'm not the right guy to ask for. I mean, you know, you like my show, so you ask me, but I'm not the right guy to ask. I think that, yeah, right, yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Well, stay tuned to the landing page on my website for the Hope and Hunger show, because that'll give you more of that. So, you know, I was so honored to be invited to come here and share these ideas with you guys, and I'm just, we can make a difference. You know, we don't need to put up with being walls, rich, and desperation. We don't need bigger walls. And we can do it because if somebody cares about faith issues and we all have the same Heavenly Father, that motivates me beautifully. But it's so clear to me, it's just a practical investment. I feel so strongly about this, but it's a lot of education, a lot of awareness raising, and media shapes our society so much these days. And it's not public media, it's all that other stuff. And I'm inside of the media, and I know how difficult it is to have thoughtful media, even in public media. My radio show used to have long interviews. You know, I still have long interviews, but everybody's pushing to have shorter and shorter interviews because nobody's got an attention span anymore. You got to have 6-minute interviews. I still have 12, 18 in an hour, but I'm the last guy standing, you know? And this is the end. I'm sure you find it even in being a professor, is people need to have razzle-dazzle and everything, you know? So we need to raise the thoughtfulness of our society. And we have lots of good, we have lots of caring people, we have lots of potential, and this is just what, to me, a travel writer, this is the greatest thing for a travel writer to do. A lot of times I think I'm like the medieval jester. In the Middle Ages, the jester, he was the most annoying guy to the king, but the king gave him room and board. The king paid him to go outside of the castle, learn what was going on, who was telling jokes and what was going on, and then he came back in and told the king what was it like outside of the walls. You know, as travelers, we go outside of the walls and we come back and we annoy people by letting them know what the other 96% of humanity really thinks. Yes, America, you're nice. Yes, America, you're great. Yes, America, you are exceptional along with the rest of us. But frankly, America, the only thing exceptional about you is that you could think you are exceptional in God's eyes. Because God loves us all. And we're just 4% of this beautiful planet. Yeah. All right, I think on that note, I'm going to thank you very much.
Thanks so much.